Hello, good morning everyone. My name is Erica Nancy John, Assistant Professor, Department of Criminology and Forensic Science from SBRR Mahajana First Grade College, Mysuru. So today we are talking about different types of fingerprint patterns and what is fingerprinting. So fingerprinting is nothing but the impression on the friction ridges which is present in the upper layer of a skin. As we all know that a fingerprint now is very important because every person has a unique fingerprinting. So as we all know, like a fingerprint, it's a very unique and individual characteristics. Why? Because even a twins or a dizygotic or a monozygotic twins also don't have a similar fingerprint pattern. So how the fingerprint start developing? So the fingerprinting is the upper layer we call as a ridge pattern. What is ridge pattern? Ridge pattern is nothing but the lining which is present on the fingerprinting. So it is why very unique, because it start developing even before the birth. Okay, so the ridges are persistent throughout the life except the permanent of a scarring. So as in the first slide we can see like what is the fundamental principle of a fingerprinting. Why fingerprinting is studied and why it is very important to study, because as the forensic science is developing and fingerprinting is developing and every person have their unique fingerprinting. So the science of identification, screening and comparing of a fingerprinting we call as the dactyloscopy. So on the basis of these signs they develop three principles. Okay, the first principle, as we know before, like no two person or no two fingers of the same person have identical ridge designed on a fingertips. So that's why fingerprints are absolutely unique, more unique than the DNA. Also in the genetic material of a human cell has maybe identical twin have same genetic material, but the fingerprinting what they are having, it's unique. Okay, so the second is the fingerprint remain unchanged throughout the life. The ridge pattern start shape during the fetal stage. So what happened inside the mother of the womb? It's like between to the 4th week of the pregnancy, the limbs start developing. Okay, and after that, in the limbs, the volar pad start developing. Volar pad is nothing but in the 7th week of pregnancy, we have observing that the fingerprinting is developing and the volar pad and the dermis layer of the skin will transfer that and we have the fingerprint pattern. Okay, so the third characteristic is nothing but fingerprint. As we all know that in fingerprinting in India we have a fingerprint central bureau which is controlled by the Ministry of Home Affairs, and also there is a one system we call it AFIS, which is automated fingerprint integrated system, that all the person of the India we have their own fingerprint and which is recorded in AFIS. Okay, so development of fingerprint in the womb. So friction ridges are estimated to be around 10 to 16th week we call as EGA, which is estimated gestational age. So during the embryonic development, the embryo undergoes with the cell division, and we all know that cell division is nothing but is meiosis, mitosis. Okay, then after this movement of the process we call as a gastrulation period. So in the layering of a fetus we have three layers. One is ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm, and the upper layer in which the dermis we call as epidermis, which possesses frictional ridges. First, in the outer layer of an embryo which is present on a skin, its skin, hair, nails and the nervous system, and in the mesoderm, which is the middle layer of the embryo, forms a dermis of the skin, and also bone, cartilage, muscle, blood vessels and sensory structure will present. And the last layer, which is endoderm, the innermost layer of embryo form a lining of digestive and respiratory system, and organ like liver and pancreas will form. Okay, so as we will see in the previous slides, like how limbs are developing. Okay, so limbs are developed about 4th week of EGA period. By the end 2nd month, the arm, leg, knee, elbow and finger and toes can be all we can see. Okay, so the swelling which is present on the upper layer of our skin in a dermis, we call as a volar pad. So it's appear on palm of the hand and sole and the feet at the time. The volar pad start developing on the fingertips around 7 to 8 week of EGA, which start from the thumb to little finger to same. So like what we are observing here, so it start from the thumb point, okay, and end with the little finger, okay. Then as a development proceed, a volar pad resists the frictional ridges development process. Frictional ridges to continue to grow about 16 weeks, and EGA will rich characteristics or minutiae become set. So in fingerprinting we have two kinds of characteristics. First is class characteristics and second is individual characteristics. Individual characteristics we also call as a minutiae. So this is all about like how the fingerprint develop inside a mother of a womb and also before birth. And one more very important thing in fingerprinting, like in fingerprint we have two kinds of things are present. That one is core and a delta, as you can see. So core is the middle part and delta is the end part of a fingerprint. Okay, so in fingerprint pattern we have three main kinds of a fingerprint pattern. First is arch, second is loop, and third is whorl. Arch is the line enters and exit from the same plane. So in arch you can observe like a wave pattern. So we call as a arch because it's a forming a arch. So in arch there is no delta and even no core. And second is tented arch. Why it is called tented arch? Because in tented arch it forms a tent. So it's called as a tented arch. It's also in tented arch there is no deltas and no core. Second is loop. In loop also we have two types of loops, like first is annular loop, second is radial loop. So in loops also it enters exit from the same side, and also in loop we observe sometimes we have one core and one delta. Annular loop, the loop opens toward the little finger, we call as a ulnar loop, and the radial loop is something which open towards the thumb. That's why we are calling a radial loop. And also sometimes so people observe like we have two bones in our hand, first bone is ulnar and second is radial. So which the ridge are opening towards that point we call as ulnar, and second which is opening toward the radial bone we call as a radial loop. And third pattern is whorl. So in whorl pattern we can observe like we have two deltas and also one core. And sometimes if you draw an imaginary line in a whorl form, if you found, so you can observe like sometimes we observe two deltas as well. And also there is another pattern we call as a double loop. So double loop it forms like a wrist, when a two wrists are coming together like this. So here you will observe two loops together, and also it also has one delta or two deltas. So maybe you are thinking why it's called as a central pocket loop and it is coming in a whorl, because sometimes it's considered like whorl and a loop are binding together and forming a whorl and a loop together. That's why we call it a central pocket loop, because in the center we'll observe in a eye pattern. This is the class characteristics of a fingerprinting. Next is the individual characteristics. So mode whorl we are observing like plain whorl, central pocket loop, double loop, and also accidental whorl. Accidental whorl, sometimes if you are observing a fingerprint, if you observe that you will found a whorl which are different types of a characteristics which is not has been seen. So we call as an accidental whorl. Okay, so next we talk about what is the individual characteristics. So that's why we are saying individual characteristic, because that makes one person fingerprint from another person's. That's why we are calling it a individual characteristics, or also we call as a minutiae. So these all patterns are designed and present in the rich pattern of your fingerprint. These small difference makes fingerprints are unique. Okay, so we have different types of individual characteristics. First is dot, second is bifurcation or a fork, third is trifurcation, fourth is a lake and enclosure. So as you can see here in dot, it's nothing but a dot is present. So that's why it's calling as a dot. Second is bifurcation. See, you can observe like one line is going and it is divided between two different lines and also forming like a fork. So that's why it's called as a fork or a bifurcation. Third is like a trifurcation. Trifurcation, it's here you can see like one line and divided in a three different pathways, and that's we call as a trifurcation. And the fourth one is lake and enclosure. Lake is nothing but here you can form like one line is falling and two lines are divided and forms like a lake kind of a structure, that we call as a lake minutiae. And the another one is ridge ending, because here you can see the ridge starts and ends from the very abruptly, that's why we call as a ridge ending. And an island, because two ridges are formed and between there is a one very minute island, that's why we call it island minutiae. Another is short ridges. Short ridge is nothing. Here you can see the one it's forming, another one is forming, and in between there is a one line, so it's a short ridge. Another is break or a gap. Here in the break or a gap, in the ridge we are forming, here it is a gap is present and another ridge is forming. So here is you see there is a gap is a present, so that's why we call as a gap minutiae. Next is a bridge. In bridge you can see here one bridge like of structure is forming. Another is hook. Hook, you can see it's formed like a hook, like a pirate or everyone is have that kind of a hook, no? So like this hook it's planning, that's why it's calling a hook. Another side we can see there's a full fingerprint. In full fingerprint you can observe here is a bifurcation, trifurcation, eye, dot, every fingerprint is present. So if you want to learn more about fingerprinting, you can simply sit in your home and you can take a fingerprint from your mother, from your father, and you can observe fingerprint over there. And also in your home also you can develop a fingerprint with the use of a talcum powder also. After that there are different types of fingerprint which is found in a crime scene, because that's why we are studying about fingerprinting, just to know about when we go in a crime scene, we'll see there are different types of fingerprint which is present in a crime scene. So there are actually three types of fingerprint patterns we'll see in a crime scene. First is patent, second is latent, third is a plastic. Patent print also called as a visible print, which is present on a smooth surface, and latent print is an invisible surface, and plastic print found in a soft material like soap. So we use different types of fingerprint powder to develop an invisible print to a visible print. So what we are developing latent to a patent print. So this is very important thing to remember. So how fingerprint are developing in our surface, because in our fingerprint there are secretion pores are present which is causing a sweat glands is connected in a fingerprint. That's when we are contact in a surface, a friction will form and you have a sensory reaction to a sensory organ. That's how the fingerprint is developing. Okay.